I'm Vernon Cronmiller, Director of the Lutheran Church in America World Hunger Appeal. My wife Betty and I traveled to several East African countries in January and February of 1985. This is the story of the southern part of Ethiopia as we saw it. Ethiopia is a country in the northeast of the great continent of Africa, on the coast of the Red Sea. It's bordered on the north and west by the Sudan, on the south by Kenya, and on the southeast by Somalia. Landing in Addis Ababa, we journeyed north along the highway to Koram. The people of Ethiopia have many times suffered from drought and hunger. Now, civil war has compounded the problems and brought starvation and death. Projects and programs there are sponsored by the Lutheran World Federation World Service and by the Mekane Yesus Church, the Lutheran Church of Ethiopia. These projects are funded by World Hunger offerings sent directly to Lutheran World Service, are routed through Lutheran World Relief. Lutheran World Relief and Canadian Lutheran World Relief are also active in the north, bringing in food through the Sudan and providing relief for the people who live in the northern provinces of Tigray and Eritrea. As you approach this land by air, you see the fields. A little bit of green, but mostly brown, and the clouds, so foreboding. Their darkness tells us that there is pain and sin ahead. Behind that dark cloud is the sun, shining through, and you know that all is not bad. The first glimpse that you get as you approach Addis Ababa is of women beginning their day by walking up into the hills to the eucalyptus forests. Since the government has taken control of the forests as part of a reforestation program, these women will pay government woodcutters the equivalent of $1 for the wood, and then carry it into the city to resell it for a profit of $1 to $1.50. When they return home at night, they may still have to walk several kilometers to get water and then cook and care for a family. And this goes on day after day after day. As we look down over the hill to see the city of Addis, it's raining. A mist over the city, and you wonder what is there. Then you go into it, and one of the first pictures you see is the statue of Lenin. Some Ethiopians call him Johnny Walker and remark, "We wish he'd keep walking right out of our country." So you know all is not contentment here. A closer look, and you see the signboards with images of Lenin, Engels, and Marx, and others from communist history. There are other decorations, figures and monuments, many erected in 1984 to celebrate 10 years of the present government. It's quite a surprise to see the North Korean designs in an African capital city. The streets up close show you something more. Crowds coming from a football game on a Saturday afternoon, intermingled with animals on the sidewalk. 2 boys playing tetherball, and early on Sunday morning 2 women sweeping, cleaning up the streets. There may be much happening on the streets, but really few signs of drought and starvation. Sunday morning we walk to worship, first at a Sudanese mission church and then a 10-block walk to the International Lutheran Church. We gather and greet the worshipers following service, and then go to visit with Art Storhog at one of the tourist hotels. Art, although retired from Lutheran World Service, has volunteered to work in Addis. The surroundings are beautiful. Can there really be a problem here? On Monday, we go to visit with the past president of the Mekane Yesus Church, Atto Emmanuel Abraham. Dr. Abraham tells my wife Betty and I about his church, about their work with the poor, their service to the homeless, and their feeding of the people. He tells of how churches and church office buildings have been taken over by the government, while at the same time the church is cooperating with the government in serving people. He asks us to commend Lutherans in North America for their partnership in this work of service. He expresses gratitude for assistance given in the past and then chides us by saying, "We hope that you people will soon learn that mission and service must go hand in hand. You can't do one without the other and still follow the Christ." We then go to visit the Central Mekane Yesus Church. It stands as a witness to the world. This one is still in regular use for worship. Inside, the altar is decorated with flowers, candles, and an Ethiopian Coptic cross. It's a privilege to stop before that altar for a moment and feel at one with these people. In Addis, we also meet with Monsignor Cole of the Roman Catholic Church. He is the current chairperson of an ecumenical organization called Churches Drought Action for Africa. Father Cole is responsible for administering $200 million over a 2-year period that has been committed by several church bodies. Since January of 1985, Catholic Relief Services has been administering much of the food coming into Ethiopia from the United States, Canada, and the European Common Market. Lutheran World Service has been transporting the food to all the feeding and distribution camps, except those operated by the government of Ethiopia. We begin our journey north to learn more about the situation and our work. We're surprised to see hundreds of people on the roads. Are these the starving people? No. It is January the 28th, the Feast of Mary. These people are coming to worship in this Coptic church. A service is held every hour on the hour throughout this day. Outside the city, we see other worshipers on horseback, gathering in the fields for their worship service. 70 kilometers north of Addis, the landscape changes. There was some water, green grass near the water, but much of the landscape was brown. Then there was the stubble and straw, and we wondered out loud and were told that, yes, grain plants did grow, but there wasn't enough moisture for the grain itself, and all that could be harvested was straw. Feed for cattle, but of no use for human consumption. The roadway now takes on a different picture. The crowds of people walk on along these roads, searching for food, searching for life. Many trucks moving in both directions. The Lutheran symbol on the door tells you that your church is there witnessing to God's love and care. He didn't forsake this land or its people. He has sent his disciples to serve. You look up and you see the sign, Ethiopia Evangelical Church, Makani Jesus, Emergency Relief Center. You stop and note the needs of the people, as well as the response provided by the church. There are green oil drums, cooking oil. The label says, gifts from the people of Canada, Lutheran, Mennonite, and Roman Catholic churches. Bags of cornmeal and skim milk, gifts from the people of the United States of America. The shaking hands can't help but remind you of the sharing of the peace. We saw similar supplies from Switzerland, Denmark, and other European countries. Your eyes meet those of the Ethiopians lined up waiting for food. They look, but you can't tell what they see or how they feel. They just stand and wait. The kitchen opens and the lines move slowly forward. Each person receives a plate of porridge, cornmeal and soybean oil mixed with a little salt and sugar, a glass of vitamin-fortified skim milk, and then they sit and try to feed the children and the nursing mothers. The food is eaten and the cup and plate are returned. Off they go to find their place to sit and wait again until the next feeding time. That's a difficult way to live. We move on toward our Land Rover, noting the discussion between the camp representatives and Jan Eriksson from Lutheran World Service as we get ready to leave. The ultimate contrast is stopping for a sandwich lunch along the road in this land of starving people. It's hard to swallow your food. Our next stop is a feeding and distribution center operated by the Makani Jesus Church. People are lined up protecting themselves from the sun with their umbrellas. Once a month, they walk 20 to 30 kilometers from their homes and villages to get here. Many times their thumbprint on their registration card is the only proof of who they are and is their pass for a new supply of food. Each family receives a ration of cornmeal, skim milk, and vegetable oil. Because they're able to live in their own homes, human dignity and individuality is maintained. When the rains come, they will be there to again plant the fields. Reports received in April indicate that the short rains did come in March. Hallelujah! We advocate that all camps be operated like this one. Back to the highway, and again the realization why no food is being grown here. The riverbeds are dry. There's very little moisture left in the ground. Culverts span non-existent streams. Refugees walk along the highway. The bag of milk in the woman's hand and the bags of meal on the donkey's back tell us that she has been at one of our camps. As the journey continues, you find the crowds waiting and waiting. This woman of about 40 years becomes the prototype of all. She crouches with arms uplifted, her body and eyes calling out for help. A mother trying to feed her child. A child 1 year old who weighs only 6 pounds. A child who is given the nipple of a dried up breast. the only food is given to the mother in the hope that her body will produce the milk so the child may be fed. 2 boys. What has happened to them? They no longer run and play. The sparkle is gone from their eyes. They, too, sit and wait. This boy could wait no longer. He took a handful of skim milk powder and tried to moisten it with his own saliva and so appease his hungry body. The landscape changes again, for now we must climb the mountains as we head north to Kobo. You look back and you see some green and realize just how difficult it must be to live here and how foolish to have cut the trees. This land was 60% forested 30 years ago and now has forests on less than 5% of the land. Our big task will be to lead people to plant new trees and to build the water catchment dams in these hills. But for now, that must wait. There are people to be fed, and the trucks of the Lutheran World Federation roll on. Kobo is our next stop. Along the road in front of the camp we see 10,000 people lined up, sitting, standing, waiting. And they do that twice each day. You step inside the camp, and you get an answer to your question. Is the food getting through? Yes. You see it piled in storehouses. Food shipments will be needed here until at least October. There won't be a harvest until then. There's enough at each camp for 1 month, and another month's supply at Desi Depot, and 1 more month in the ships on the way. You thank God that your church was here and was able to provide the transportation system and to administer these programs. In the meantime, we must keep our dollar gifts coming each month so the trucks can roll and the food be delivered. You find the oil barrels again. They have been emptied and cut in half. Now they are cooking pots. The cooking operation is almost continuous. Both porridge and bread are cooked, fried, and served. In this camp you also see the children. They come or are brought once a week to be weighed and measured. If they drop below 70% of normal weight, they are placed on a supplemental diet. They and nursing mothers are fed milk and porridge several times a day. Once their weight approaches normal, indicated by the green band on the chart, they are again given a regular diet at home. A sight for sore eyes appeared before us. Boys who looked healthy, and we learned they have been in the area of the camps for more than 3 years. There is hope. There is joy. Thanks be to God. Our church, His church, has been and is here. There are also self-help programs in this and other areas. Adults who have secured food are working on food for work projects, terracing the hills, preparing for a new day when the rains come. These buildings house government officials as well as those of the Lutheran World Federation and the Makani Jesus Church. We meet with administrative officers from each, and then across the road as we pass, we sneak pictures of another Makani Jesus Church, now used by the government. Worship services may not be held. The people must worship in their homes, and they do. Who would believe that a persecuted people would join with their persecutors to serve the needs of others? On the road are more trucks owned by both the government and the church, which raise yet another question. Who will keep up the roads in the country? How much longer will the trucks be able to operate? We move on to one of the government camps, up to 50,000 people in some of these. There has to be discipline and tight administration because of the size of the crowd. Young people are engaged to police these people. Not a happy scene, but one that is needed wherever so many people gather. Many of these people have come from the north. During the last few years, they have been forced to use up everything they owned. They've used the wood in their houses for firewood, and on the way to the camp, they have sold their last pieces of silver for food. They have nothing. They arrive and are herded into the shaving and steaming tents, and the last of their dignity is gone. If their clothes hold together during the steaming, they are returned, and if not, they are given a blanket. A new life begins. Lineups, waiting, sleeping in tents or under plastic, begging for food, hearing a constant invitation to volunteer for resettlement. Day turns into night, into day. The same people, the same scene, the same needs. Some give in and decide to accept resettlement. They are taken by truck or bus 1,200 kilometers away, almost 2,000 miles from their homes. No one knows what life will be like there. Can their bodies adjust to a different climate? Will they die along the way? These and other unanswered questions come to our minds and lips as we saw 57 vehicles carrying people south, 5,000 people a day. There wasn't time to stop for those who were sick. They just leaned their head out the window or over the side of the truck. We are reminded of the shadow of death that hangs over this land. People walk down the road holding a man's suit on a pole carried above their head. That's a sign to the community that another person is dead. Hope does spring eternal. The sun shines through the clouds. We begin our journey south over winding roads. The dust clouds rising up behind the trucks. Yet there's a patch of green in the valley here and another there. A tree or trees have been planted. Some people have broken the fields. Some oxen can still plow. There are men with the strength to hold a plow. There's hope for tomorrow. Maybe a crop this year. This boy leaves us with our parting thoughts. He has a smile on his face, a sparkle in his eye. In a land where there's little food and no toys, he has made his own. A cigarette carton, wire wheels, a bamboo stick, a circular hoop. He can play. He has used his own ingenuity to bring happiness to his life. Life has not gone out of Ethiopia. Betty and I didn't really leave that land, for we are still there with you. Your and our offerings to the World Hunger Appeal make it possible for us to be there through our agencies, Lutheran World Relief, Canadian Lutheran World Relief, Lutheran World Federation World Service, in partnership with the Makani Jesus Church. We are there as God's disciples to care for and meet the needs of others. Stop for a moment and give praise to God that we all have this privilege to serve in response to His love for us.